Hi everyone. So today I'm going to jump straight into it because I'm talking about one of my favorite topics, which is RAW versus JPEG and what should you shoot and why, and the advantages and the disadvantages of each. Before we go any further, let me just put it out there. You're supposed to be shooting in RAW, and I'll explain why in just a minute. My name is Thandiwe Muriu, and if this is your first time watching the channel, thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button to get more photography related videos every Monday and Thursday. So, RAW and JPEG. What is RAW and what is JPEG? They're both file formats, which is how your camera records all the data collected by your image sensor when you take a picture onto your SD card. In RAW format, the camera takes all the information from the scene in front of you that you've captured with your camera and puts it onto your memory card. It doesn't change anything, it doesn't make any decisions for you. It just says, this is it, the information I've collected, and it all goes into this card. Whereas in the JPEG format, your camera takes that information and compresses it to give you a smaller file size. So it makes some decisions for you in order to compress those files and then puts it onto your memory card. So what kind of decisions does a camera make for you when it's saving files as JPEG format? Number one, it will lock down your white balance. It will add some sharpness to your pictures. It will lock down the exposure and many other things that are involved in post-processing in your image. Why you should shoot RAW format, number one, is because these decisions are made by you later on when you open your image in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever software you use. Cameras are really smart because of advances in technology, but sometimes they don't make the best decisions. So you don't always want your camera deciding what information should it record and what it should leave out. You want to be able to make that decision for yourself, which is why I shoot RAW. It gives me a lot more control in post-processing. However, as amazing as RAW is, there's several disadvantages. The first being, of course, because the data is uncompressed, the file sizes are really, really big, which means that you need to invest in a lot of storage for your images. On my Nikon D750, when I use it with a 32 GB memory card, if I'm shooting JPEG and I'm saving my files as JPEG files, I can save over 1,100 JPEG images on the 32 GB card. However, if I'm shooting in RAW, I can only save 525 images on the 32 GB card. So you can see there's a really big difference. But for me, it's worth it because the RAW files give me a lot more control in post-processing. By extension, because the file sizes are so big, you're actually going to have to invest a lot more in hard disks or cloud storage or whichever storage format you choose for your images. The second big disadvantage of shooting RAW is that you need software to process the images. Unlike JPEG, I could shoot in JPEG, take the memory card out of the camera and put it in whatever computer is around, and it will be able to recognize the images. I don't need any additional software. All the software that you find for viewing images, whether it's Finder or it's Image Preview in Windows, can read JPEG images. But with RAW files, you need to actually have either Lightroom or Photoshop or Adobe Bridge or some software that can read those files. Whenever I'm delivering images to a client, usually I'll deliver them in JPEG, so I'll actually have to take my RAW files, convert them into JPEGs, and then send them to the client. So this costs me a little bit of time, but again, RAW is worth it because of the flexibility it gives me in post-processing. Unfortunately, a lot of the software that you'll need to read RAW files is not free. There could be some free one out there, so if you know of any, please post it in the comment section below so that we all know the choices that we have. But my preferred software is either Adobe Camera Raw or Capture One to process my RAW files. The last disadvantage I find when shooting RAW is that the buffering time is much slower on your camera. Buffering time essentially is the time it takes for the camera to take an image and the data that it's collected on its sensor and write it to the memory card. With advances in technology, the camera doesn't have to take one image and then stop shooting and record it on your memory card. It can take several, and then it will need to take a small pause if you're shooting to put them onto your memory card. Because RAW files are so big, it will actually take your camera a few seconds longer to buffer them, to write them onto your memory card, as opposed to JPEG files. It'll also write fewer RAW files onto your memory card at a time. So with JPEG, you can burst your shutter. That means you press it many times continuously before the camera tells you, hold on, you need to take a second to write this onto the memory card. Whereas with RAW files, you may not have that flexibility. And this is a disadvantage for anyone who shoots in fast-paced situations. So if you're shooting rallies, or if you're shooting the kiss at the wedding and you want to burst your shutter, or if you're shooting sports, you may want faster buffering times. So I've mentioned all the disadvantages of shooting in RAW file format, but there's so many more advantages, and I want to take some time to just discuss those with you. Number one is exposures. The nice thing about RAW files is the camera doesn't decide that the image should be this bright when it writes it onto the memory card. So when you're editing your images, it allows you a lot more flexibility to recover overexposed areas or to recover underexposed areas. That is making the image darker or making it brighter. This is really helpful when you're shooting in really bright environments, for example, where your subject may be so much darker than the background behind them. So for example, if you're shooting somebody on a sunny day and they're in the shade, but the background is in the sun, you want to be able to have the flexibility to recover the highlights in the background and to make it less bright and more matched with your subject. Or you want the flexibility to make your subject brighter to match the background. And RAW files give you this opportunity. It's possible to do it with JPEGs as well, but you can only move the exposure slider in a much smaller range before the image starts just looking unnatural. The second big benefit of shooting in RAW is that you can easily adjust your white balance. White balance just refers to the color temperature of your picture, how warm it is, so how yellow it is, or how cold it is, which is how blue it is. I've often found in event photography, you'll be faced with situations where the stage is lit with lights that either change color or are different colors, and all that affects how your camera will read the color in the image. And sometimes after you take the picture, when you're editing it, you may want to either reduce how red the reds are or increase the blues, because the colored lights for some reason have made the colors in your image look unnatural, especially on people. So the benefit of shooting RAW is that it allows you to change your white balance very easily. When I've tried to change white balance on JPEG images, I find that I can do it for a very small range and then the colors start behaving very funny. And I'll actually show you an example of this on screen so you can see. And this is because the RAW files just have so much more data in them. They allow you to test the upper and the lower limits of the color range of your camera in post-processing. When it comes to color, which is something I really love in my images, I always shoot RAW because it also gives me more color options. When you shoot in RAW file format, because the camera isn't making decisions for you when it compresses files, it stores a lot more color information, which is why your file sizes are so much bigger. But that means in post-processing, if I have, let's say, a blue dress and I want to change it to purple, I can do so without it looking unnatural or like it was pasted onto the model. And that is a really big advantage if you're shooting the sky and you want to increase the intensity of the blue. You're going to get a much more natural blue looking color. And if you change the sliders in your image editing software, it's also not going to look as fake as quickly as if you shot it on a JPEG file format. Still on the topic of colors, another big benefit of shooting in RAW versus JPEG is that you can choose a color space that you want your images to be. Now, a very basic explanation of color space is it's how your computer or machine reads color. And there's several options. There's things like sRGB, RGB, and many others. And depending on how the picture is going to be used, is it going to be used in print? Is it going to be used online? Are you just going to look at it on your computer? All those factors determine which color space you want to use. And RAW file format gives you the option of selecting which one you want. With JPEG, you don't have that option. For somebody like me who sometimes has my images being printed, I may want to change the color space to sRGB instead of Adobe RGB so that they look their best in print. I'm not saying it's impossible to print JPEG files, but when you shoot in RAW and you can choose your color space, it gives you the best option for whatever end output you're going to go for. Lastly, one of the huge benefits of RAW over JPEG is that RAW files do not lose quality over time. What happens with a JPEG image is if I open the same image over and over and over again and I save and I make changes, over time the image actually deteriorates, which means that the colors will slightly shift, it may not be as sharp, and you'll just notice an overall loss of image quality. But with a RAW file, I could open the same RAW file over and over again and save changes to it, and there will be no loss of quality. Now, it's not impossible to go around this problem when you have a JPEG. What it means is every time you open and make changes to the JPEG and save it, you need to save it as a copy. Don't overwrite the original JPEG. But sometimes that's a lot of work. So with RAW files, you don't even have to worry about that. You can open the image as many times as you want, and there's no change in quality over the years. Thanks for watching. That's all I had for now. There's a lot more information out there about the different file formats that you can actually photograph and save your files in, but I really wanted to give a basic introduction and just highlight JPEG and RAW. When I begin discussing my retouching process, I'll go a lot more in depth into the more technical side of the RAW file formats. Thanks for watching. If this is your first time on the channel, thank you for viewing this video. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button to get videos every Monday and Thursday. And if this is not your first time viewing the channel, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. If you have any comments or questions about the two file formats, or you want to share your experience with both, please put it in the comment section below. If you want to talk to me on social media, you can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or off my website, www.thandiwe.com. Any gear that I've mentioned in this video is listed in the description box below, so you know where to get it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so I know more of what you want to hear about. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.